Warm welcome and good morning or good afternoon or good evening to everyone here. This is the Sunday Sound of Dhamma program, and that means that we'll do about 15 or so minutes of guided meditation, and then I will share a Dhamma talk, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions, reflections, concerns, comments, whatever you would like to bring forth. And today we're going to do a meditation on mindfulness of breathing, maybe the first 4 steps or so of the Anapanasati, mindfulness of in and out breathing. So you can do this one of 2 ways, and you just to see how it works for you. You may not be aware actually that you've already selected one or the other, but buenos días, Claudia. We're going to do mindfulness of breathing, and one way to do it is so that the breath is in the forefront of the mind at all times. And practicing that way is more of a concentration or an immersion form of practicing the mindfulness of breathing. Or you can do it such that the awareness of the in and out breath is more in the background after we get to the step of the body. And that is just using the breath as an anchor. And that's more of a mindfulness practice, an anchor for keeping you in the present moment. So you don't probably need to make a conscious choice about that. You can just see actually perhaps which is your tendency as we guide, as we walk our way through it. So you can begin by establishing your meditation posture, maybe a bit of movement. Letting go of any tendency to lean toward the computer. And allowing the body to find a balanced, upright position. Relaxing the belly and allowing the body to settle. Be still right here, right now. Just taking a few more moments to really sense the natural stability of the body on your seat. And by now, perhaps the sensations of the breath have become apparent. You can rest the mind on the sensations of the breath, breathing the body. Just allowing the breath its natural rhythms. Resting the mind on the sensations of breath and noticing which is in breath and which is out breath. Just allowing the breath to be a whole experience. Noticing the length of the breath. No need to change it in any way. Just aware whether the breath is short or long. And in these last few moments of the meditation, and opening the attention to the whole body from head to toe, the whole body at once, and still aware of the breath, breathing the body in and out. Wonderful. That brings us to the conclusion of today's meditation. You might have noticed that I always do a bow at the end of the meditation, just as a way of us acknowledging each other's effort, each other's presence together in this practice. So yes, we're all welcome to share in that practice. And so today I'm going to give a Dhamma talk. It's St. Patrick's Day in some parts of the world. Here in the UK, certainly, it's St. Patrick's Day. And we're not going to talk about saints or Patricks, sorry to say. We're going to talk about some other things. So let me begin with the homage to the Buddha. If you know it and you would like to chant along, please feel welcome to do so. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Lovely. So if you have ever questioned whether or not you have what it takes to wake up or to follow the path of awakening, then I want to assure you that since the beginning of Buddhism, since before Buddhism was called Buddhism, there have been teachings about your capacity to wake up. So the Buddha spoke about the historical Buddha, so an Indian man who lived about 2,500 or so years ago, gave some teachings about the Pancha Indriya in Pali. That's it's not the language that he spoke. Let's be clear about that. Most likely, it's not the language that he spoke, but it is a language similar to what he would have spoken at the time. Pali, which is a language kind of similar to Sanskrit. Sanskrit becomes the language of Buddhist sutras later on. But in any event, 5 faculties, pancha means 5, and indriya is faculties or powers. We might think of them as capacities. So it's interesting because these are not things that are being developed necessarily, but rather they are capacities that you already have. And I want to really emphasize that point because the 5 are sort of your toolbox for awakening. Or that's one way to think about them. Now, it's not the same as the qualities that are required to awaken or the qualities that are present at awakening. Those would be the Bojjhanga, the 7 factors of awakening. Those are slightly different, the factors. But these are some tools that you have at your disposal for walking the path of awakening. And so there are 5, as I said, and just to name them to start out with. So I will give you the Pali words, although you may or may not be interested in that. And I just want to say that also, if you want to follow along or you want to study this a little bit more, you would find it on Samyutta Nikaya 48, chapter 48, number 9, Samyutta Nikaya 48.9. So that means the collected or the linked discourses. Connected, or linked discourses. Samyutta Nikaya. So we have saddha, means faith or trust. And then virya, energy or effort. Sati, mindfulness. Samadhi, immersion or concentration. And panya, wisdom. So these are your capacities. And we begin with this word saddha, meaning faith or trust. Sometimes faith is a difficult word for us in the West, or for folks who have come out of one tradition, one faith tradition or one spiritual tradition, and change to another one. Sometimes it can be a difficult word or something that's just not clear. What is it that we're asked to have faith in? Maybe you have more of a rational approach to life, and you think faith is something that you don't need to have. Especially for Buddhism. Buddhism actually has been, you could say, sort of westernized in that way sometimes, that people try to erase the need for faith in the practice of Buddhism in the West. But that's really kind of not the original, the early teaching, nor is it, I think, emblematic of later forms of Buddhism either. But the thing that, so what do we ask to have faith in or trust in? Trust, confidence, and maybe that sounds easier for some folks. It was for me for many years, that way of thinking about it. And we're asked to have faith in the Buddha's awakening. Not in the Buddha as a human being, actually, as a person or as a deity or as a perfect anything or omniscient or any of those things. We're just asked to have some faith that the Buddha awakened to an experience of the world, the truth about our world. So that we have some idea that maybe it's possible that that's what he did. That we're willing to imagine that somebody, this person, historically, was capable of having a completely transformative experience of their own life in such a way that he woke up to wisdom, to a particular kind of wisdom. So that's also a little bit about ourselves, right? Because what does the Buddha teach? The Buddha teaches, I can't wake you up. You have to wake yourself up. Each one of us walks the path, right? Even on his deathbed, what did he say? He said, Vaya Dhamma Sankara Pamadena Sampadita. He said, conditioned things, constructed things are falling apart. Therefore, fulfill the path with diligence. You go do this thing. So there was no question in his mind that you have the capacities, right? So when we're asked to have faith in the Buddha's awakening, the Buddha puts that faith back in us. And so ultimately it is a faith about our own ability to have a completely transformative experience of our own minds and bodies. So now maybe that's possible, huh? Maybe that's possible. You could open your mind to some trust or some confidence in that, or at least a willingness to explore it. How about it? Huh? And sometimes we're helped by other factors or other people in our faith. So for that, I want to share this poem. So it's Women's History Month. March is Women's History Month. We are on the Dassanaya Instagram page. We are doing a whole series every single day of postings on different women in Buddhist history. And just a little tiny vignette of each one. And I'm offering teachings by Buddhist women. And so today we're going to listen to a poem. And this is some verses by a Teres. So the Teres were the Arahants, the awakened, enlightened women of the Buddha's Sangha, the original Sangha. And I always imagine them getting together in the circle in the full moon and telling each other these poems. That's how these poems were recited and memorized over centuries, right? And because they would get together on the full moon and on the new moon to recite their precepts and to talk about how things were going. They had many times been separate, gone out and taught in different places, and then they would come back together and tell each other recite these poems. So this is a poem, and unfortunately we've lost the name of this nun who told this story. So it's Anyatara Terigata. It is unknown, verses of unknown nun, unknown Arhanta, the time. And she says this. It's a relatively short poem, and I'm not going to unpack the whole thing, but I will read you the whole thing. She says, in 25 years since I went forth, so she had been a nun for 25 years, I had not found peace of mind even for as long as a finger snap. So she speaks about her struggles. She starts out by talking about her struggles on the path, right? Failing to find peace of heart. Excuse me. Corrupted. So I'm using a translation. A translation by Bhante Sujato. Corrupted by sensual desire, just wanting sensual pleasures, I cried with flailing arms as I entered a dwelling. And it's a vihara, so it could have been a monastic dwelling, most likely. But then there's a turning point, and here's the turning point. She says, I approached another nun in whom I had faith. Yame sadayikahu. So she could have faith, not in her own capacity at that moment, because she'd been struggling for so long, but in this other person, this other woman on the path. She said, okay, here's somebody that I could have some faith in. Let me talk to her. Let me see what it is. Some trust could develop here and I could get some help. And that is a moment of wisdom right there. That moment in which she decides to reach out and get some help. So she taught me the Dhamma, this nun that I approached, and about the aggregates, the 5 aggregates, the sense fields, the elements. And when I heard her teaching, I retired to a quiet place. And now I know my past lives, my clairvoyance, the minds of others. My mind is purified. I've realized the powers, the end of the defilements. I've realized the 6 kinds of direct knowledge and fulfilled the Buddha's instructions. So she says because she made that choice to trust in another person, she was able to completely fulfill the path. So when you think about faith or trust, you could think about a number of different ways to approach that. And usually it's said that faith and wisdom balance each other. So when we look at the five faculties, faith or saddha is balanced by panya, by wisdom. You say, wait, how does that work exactly? So faith, you could say, or trust is about knowing that it's possible for you to experience something you haven't experienced yet. And so what's wisdom about? So wisdom, and this is a very interesting part here. The Buddha defines wisdom here as a disciple who knows, a student who knows the wisdom of arising and passing away, which is noble, penetrative, and leads to the end of dukkha, the end of unsatisfactoriness or suffering. The wisdom of knowing, arising, and passing away. And that sounds kind of too simple, right? It sounds too simple. And it sounds a little dry. Like, so what? So you know arising and passing away. But isn't that the nature of our lives? This dynamic event that is a body and a mind? Isn't that what we are studying? Isn't that what is our instrument for experiencing the true nature of reality? This arising and passing away right here, right now, is noble. What does that mean? It's something that lifts us up. It's not something that drags us down. The Dhamma is not intended to be a drag. The Dhamma is intended to be something which lifts you up. And penetrative, right? Deeply insightful, going to the real depths, the real truths. And something that brings the end of suffering. So this wisdom of knowing is what balances the faith or the trust in what you don't know yet, right? You can say, okay, I know up to this point, and because I know up to this point, then I can ask myself, do I have faith in what might come? So these two go together. These two go together. And it's alive, it's vibrant. This kind of wisdom is alive, it's vibrant, and it's unobstructed by anything. The nature of reality is right here, unobstructed. So what are the other faculties that are helping for us to actually ascertain this, to have this kind of experience of our own wisdom? So then we have the other 2 balancing factors. So we have virya, which is energy or effort, and samadhi, immersion, or the stilling of the mind. So the particular effort that the Buddha mentions in this sutta is that he speaks about the effort to set down unskillful qualities, right? Stop doing the things that are stirring up harmful consequences in our lives, in our minds, and the effort to foster skillful qualities, right? So, as much as possible, fostering the wholesome, making those good choices as much as we can, right? So that we have those conditions in our hearts and our minds and our lives, and that we're also setting into motion the karmic consequences of those things, right? We're setting into motion the karmic results of wholesome actions as much as possible. So then, what is that balanced with? Right? So that's balanced with the samadhi. Right? Why? Because awakening is not something that you can make happen. You also have to learn how to find the natural clarity of the mind, to let the natural clarity of the mind come through. So you might think of samadhi or the immersion practices, or what are sometimes called the concentration practice, as something that's very, very active. But actually, I would suggest that it's a little bit different. It's about learning how to rest the mind on itself, to let the mental experience become predominant. So we often see these kind of metaphors. You know, I love to throw metaphors at you all so you can see which ones stick and which ones help. And so oftentimes we see metaphors about water in Buddhism, water as an example of what is the experience of mind. So I want to say this: when your mind is busy with a lot of thinking, it's like you could think of the mind as being perhaps like an ocean, okay, like the Pacific. So big you cannot see its boundaries, right? And when your mind is busy with a lot of thinking, then it's like you picking up a cup of water out of the ocean every time. Each thought is like taking a cup of water out of the ocean every time and giving it that shape. Then the water gets poured back when the thought is over. Okay? So what you're doing is you're giving this shape to the mind with this activity. But samadhi is saying, let all of that become still. Don't take any cups of water out of the ocean. Let all of that become still. And then immediately, by its nature, it becomes vast, it becomes clear. You can see all the way to the bottom. So in a way, I like to think of samadhi as being a way of not giving the mind a shape. You just let it rest on itself. You let it rest on its own. So this is a little tricky part sometimes for meditation instruction, right? If you're using the breath, for example, as your meditation, your object on which you're trying to concentrate, at some point you are paying attention to the physical sensation itself, the literal like feeling of the air passing by your nostril, for example, or some other movement, physical sensation. But at some point, in order for concentration to develop, the mind will start to pull away from the physicalness, from the physicality, and just be the mental experience of that physical phenomena. You can feel it. There's like a literal kind of pulling back. And when that happens, you want to let it happen. You don't want to stick it back onto the physicality. You want to let the mental become the predominant. And that's how samadhi develops. So now the Buddha goes on and he talks about samadhi in terms of the jhanas in the next one, 48.10, which is also a similar analysis of the five faculties. But I want to say also that there are degrees of concentration that are helpful even before being able to practice the jhanas. The jhanas are wonderful. The jhanas are helpful. There are things I would suggest that insights that very naturally come from those types of meditation experiences. But if you're not having those kinds of meditation experiences, does that mean that you can't have concentration? No, I think there are various kinds of other concentration that can arise, not as clear, perhaps not as focused, but nonetheless still useful. Still useful. But know that samadhi and effort, they are balancing each other. Right? There's the intentional part and the part where we are making, applying ourselves diligently, not slacking off on the path. And then there is also this aspect of really, really leaning back and letting the mind find its own clarity. And then finally the fifth. So the fifth, or the middle one in the list, right? If we take it as a list, which usually I try to recommend not to do that. Don't think about these. There's a joke, right, that Buddhists love lists. And that's because a lot of the teachings, early teachings especially, come in that way, right? There's one of these and 5 of those and 7 of the other and so on. Right? But I want to suggest that it's much more skillful to relate to them as frameworks, as ways that, as collections, where the Buddha has said, first look at this, and then have a look at this, and then have a look at that. See if you can distinguish the difference between this and that and that and that, and so on. That's the way to think about these so-called lists. So in our framework today, the 5th one that I want to speak about is mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness. And a simple, perhaps, definition of mindfulness is receptive, non-judgmental awareness of phenomena in the present moment. Just that, receptive, non-judgmental awareness of phenomena in the present moment. And that receptivity is pointing us at the way in which this phenomena actually works, the way in which the body and the mind actually work. And the things that we experience too, right? We start to encounter a different relationship to the world when we have mindfulness. Sometimes I joke around, if you guys are ever on Facebook or you're on Twitter and you see people do these postings after they've been on retreat for a long time, or even while they're on silent retreat for a while, and they'll post like a dewdrop. And I'm like, right, that person's on retreat. Can you tell? Right? Because they are so entranced. Like, that's worth posting to Facebook right there. This dewdrop on this leaf this morning. How cool is that? Right? That's the space that they're in, because their mindfulness is strong in those moments. Yeah. Otherwise, if it wasn't, they would have walked right by the dewdrop. Who cares? What? It's not a thing, right? It's not even a phenomenon that enters your cognitive experience if you're not mindful. But there you go. People post their pictures of leaves and dewdrops and rocks, all kinds of stuff. And it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful. It's like, you've awakened that wonderful aha, that wonderful, right? Curiosity about the world. Oh, look, it's like this. Oh my gosh, look, this morning, it's like this. Beautiful, beautiful. So you have these 5 capacities. You have these 5 capacities. Faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Right here in your toolbox. And I hope that you really put them to good use. That you use that toolbox to wake up to the beautiful dewdrops in the morning. And to the profound, profound truths that are demonstrated right here, right now. Completely unobstructed.